Thank you, Ms. Christie, for that. If you have your Bibles, please turn to Ecclesiastes chapter number 10. Ecclesiastes chapter number 10. And we'll continue with our series on true happiness. True happiness as we're doing the study through Ecclesiastes. And I know that the Pastor Mike, as he read the verses here this morning, kind of just leaves you there like, okay, that wasn't the most energizing and helpful verses to read at the beginning of a service, but as we understand that as we're doing this series through the book of Ecclesiastes, I want to continue just marching through this. And so the message today is not geared towards our anniversary Sunday, but the Word of God is a wonderful and powerful book, and I think it's helpful to us to be able to keep studying through this. And so if you permit me, just give some introductory notes and we'll jump right into Ecclesiastes chapter number 10. And so as Solomon continues his proverbial instruction with advice and illustrations about life, in search for true happiness, he attempts to warn his readers of the dangers of refusing wisdom. There are many uncertainties in life which, if not put in their proper place, can cause confusion and despair. You can just take note if you would. If you want to look there, you can. But back in chapter 9, that's the last place that we preached on Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 11 through 18, Solomon speaks of a poor wise man who was not remembered for delivering a city from a powerful invading army. And yet this poor wise man was the one that came up with a plan, and the plan was to deliver the city against a strong and mighty army, a king that was coming in against them. But this poor wise man was the one who figured out the plan and delivered the city from destruction. But nobody remembered who he was. Nobody remembered the story about him. And Solomon, as you go through and you study the book of Solomon, book of Ecclesiastes, you understand that he's bringing to light some things that he saw as injustices or inequities or things that he just thought were questionable. And as we go through the book of Ecclesiastes, you realize here's a king, the richest king that we know ever, a king that had all wisdom, but a king also that made some mistakes, and a king that no doubt was known because he had 700 wives and concubines. So you can just imagine the experience this man had, both on in a earthly experience, but then also at one point in time in his life, he had such a love for his God that he took what his father had prepared for all the temple buildings, and he was able to construct and build a temple. The Spirit of God came down in that temple, and he demonstrated that it was God's presence would be there. But God gave Solomon a warning. He warned about idolatry, and he warned him about going after other women. And those are the areas that Solomon fell. And yet God was gracious to warn him ahead of time, but yet Solomon did not heed God's warning, and that's exactly what caused his kingdom to finally be taken from him. Of course, he lived a full life, and on his death, it was his sons and the people after him that suffered the consequences because of his own sins. He suffered some in his life, but not like the rest of his kingdom would suffer after his death. And so I say all this to say that Solomon was pointing out some inequities. And I want you to notice in chapter number 9, in verse number 15, it says, "Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by wisdom delivered the city, yet no man remembered the same poor man." And so this is this injustice that he was seeing, this inequity that Solomon was making note of. And then verse 16, he says, "Then said I, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard." And this is true sometimes that we find in life. Sometimes the wise man or the wise woman is cast aside, and someone who is more popular, maybe somebody who is more fun, somebody who's more energetic will take the limelight, and yet that person really doesn't have the wisdom to lead or the ability to lead properly. They're not a person of principle. And sometimes the people who have the principle and the people who are the wisest get pushed to the side where someone of popularity comes and takes the forefront. And he's seeing this as a danger. He's writing about it as something that he has seen in his own life. Verse number 17 then goes on to say, "The words of the wise men are heard in quiet more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools." Then he says in verse 18, "Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good." One sinner can compromise the great things that have been accomplished. One sin that you make, one flaw in your own life can sometimes ruin your own reputation. And that's where we pick it up here in chapter number 10. And I'm going to give you several points as he's now going through and he's making these proverbial comments from things that he has seen and experienced as a king. And he's relaying that information to us so we might learn and heed the warnings from someone who's been there, done that. And he wants to make sure that, I think personally, he's looking at his own children as a king and knowing that he has most likely multitudes of children. Perhaps at this point in his life, this is just a few years before he dies. And we recognize he's looking back over his length of his ruling, and he's looking at the mistakes he's made, he's looking at the benefits, he's giving his life experience, and he's giving some proverbial wisdom on what to do and what not to do as someone who walks this earth, if you would. But wisdom can be compromised by one sinner's action. How many times have you heard these statements? And you can finish it with me if you will. One bad apple spoils the bunch. All right, you've heard that one before. How about a little leaven leavens the whole lump? One rotten egg spoils the... That's not as familiar anymore today. Spoils the omelet. So and there's many, many more that we can give. These are little proverbial statements that are made to just kind of insinuate that someone's going, that somebody can, one bad item or one bad person or one bad comment can sometimes now ruin your testimony with somebody. And that is so true. I'll raise my hand that, man, there's been times I've said stuff, I wish I could take it back, and you can't. There's been times I wish I didn't make a certain decision, and you can't take it back. There's been times I wish I didn't hang out with a certain crowd, or I wish I didn't do a certain... You can't take those things back, and now you're living with the consequences of those actions or those words that you have spoken. Well, this is a great lesson on how to protect yourself and how to set up safeguards for you as a person walking down the pathway of this life and trying to guard your testimony and your reputation. So the title I've given to this message is Don't Play the Fool. Don't play the fool. You'll notice as we go through there, 9 times in this chapter, chapter 10, the word fool or some derivative of fool is mentioned. The book of Proverbs, who Solomon also wrote, over 120 times he mentions the word fool or foolishness or some type of folly. Over 100. He speaks a lot about this, and you wonder why. Well, Solomon lived the fool. You have to understand, the wisest king, he still was able to make foolish decisions. Just because you're wise does not mean that you do not still have a sin nature. You still have desires of the flesh. You still have a desire perhaps to do things and make the wrong decision at certain times. We must understand, we're human. As Christians, how many of us perhaps have ruined the testimony of Christianity for someone else who is a non-Christian? They look at you at some point in time in your life when you were wandering, you were questioning, maybe you were living in sin for a while, and now those people that know you during that time think, if that's Christianity, I want nothing to do with it. You're a fake, you're a fraud, you're a loser. I mean, who knows what they could say about us in our times of weakness? And if we're all held to that all the time, then boy, we're in trouble. But we understand we're saved sinners. We're supposed to be growing in our faith. We're supposed to be becoming more like Christ. He's preparing us for a day where we'll finally meet Him. Salvation is a one-time event. That's the gift of Jesus Christ to you who believe that Jesus was sufficient to die in your place as God. He died. He paid your sin debt. He was buried. He rose again from the dead. If you trust Jesus Christ, your Savior, you're saved. But that now begins your sanctification process. Now it's starting to start living for Christ. There are some things that you'll be convicted. I was talking with someone who was newly saved just last week, and they say, you mentioned one time, Pastor, in the message that we'll feel guilty about things that we didn't even know were something's written in the Bible. He says, I sense that now. And I said, that's interesting. That's the Holy Spirit of God telling you there's just certain things. Whether it's a sin or just not something you're supposed to do, the Holy Spirit of God can just prompt you like, why are you thinking that? Why are you going there? Why would you say that? Why would you do that? That's the Holy Spirit now trying to work in you. Now listen, we can shut that out. You ever wanted to just say, God, turn your back for a little while, let me do what I want to do? Am I the only hypocrite in here? Okay. There's times I wish, just turn your blind. God, can you just make yourself not know what I'm doing? You're all powerful, and I'm being facetious, but you realize, because we're human. Solomon was human. He understood life. He understood the temptations. He had everything. Listen, everything a man would want, he had it at his disposal. Good and bad. And he lived it all. And then he writes about it. He says, basically, I messed up. Now, most of us would say, some of the wise people, that's what he's saying, the wise people will take the heed to my warnings. Don't go down that road. The fool says, I have to experience it myself. And he says, okay, you may not recover like some. And I can tell you, friends, that I've known for many, many years some Christians that have turned their back on God. And I say turn their back on God, they just got wrapped up in the world. They got wrapped up in their flesh. They want to do their thing. Some of them died in the process. Some of them are so far from God, they say, I don't think God even wants back. So that's not true. God will always take you back. No, not for me. It's like, come on. Yes, he does. He loves you. Now, it's too much for me to get back where I used to. Don't worry about where you used to be. Just get back. And they just, nope. And others that maybe they truly weren't born again. Maybe they truly weren't saved and they have lived a life of a lie and have gone off and to do things that they have no conviction. They have no guilt from God at all. And now listen, God doesn't want you to live under guilt. He wants you to live blessed. He wants you to live knowing that you're building a relationship with Him and that you can have His blessings in your life. Problems come in life. We know that as Christians. But God will help you through them if you have the right mindset. So the idea of this message, don't play the fool. Don't play the fool. All right, verse number 1. This is kind of an interesting starting point, but it says, dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. So doth a little folly him that is in the reputation for wisdom and honor. So here we have the first thing that he's using, and what a way to start out the next portion here. And I have the main point I'll give you for this one is verses 1 through 7. Guard your reputation. Guard your reputation. Listen, it's one thing as a Christian or as a non-Christian to have a reputation. I have unsaved friends. I have unsaved acquaintances, neighbors, and they're good people. But my goal is to try to get them to come around to a point where they could trust Jesus Christ as their Savior. Yes, they're good people. They're good neighbors. We help each other out with different things. They're good people, but I fear for them that if they don't trust Christ, what good is it to be a good person here on this earth and still die and go to hell? I want them to know the saving grace of Jesus Christ, and I want them to have that experience of having a relationship with God, not just go through religious practice. And so we should all have a burden for the lost, but yet we understand too that our reputation goes along with being God followers. What's your reputation like with those around you? And let me give you the understanding here. Foolish behavior can ruin a good reputation. A person may ruin their reputation with a little bit of foolishness. The idea of folly or foolishness is senseless or stupid behavior. That's really what it comes from, the word stupid. It means that we act in a senseless manner. We go against what would be wise counsel. We go against what would be good for us to do. We do the opposite. We do something that's risky or dangerous or sadly immoral, and we're willing to take that risk even though we know it's not right. That's playing the fool. That's being stupid. That's being senseless. The idea of a dead fly. An apothecary was a place where they made perfume. They would put the perfume and they would mix the ingredients of the perfume into these vials, if you would, or into these pots. And what would happen if they left it uncovered, the flies would go in, and if the flies would go in there and die in that ointment, you can imagine some of you, maybe you've mixed something up before and you've gone outside and set it out to cool, you come back and there's flies in it. Well, if you left those flies in there long enough, they would rot. And that beautiful, expensive perfume or ointment that you had in there, because of the sweetness of its flavor, would attract the flies who would go in there trying to get a sweet drink or some kind of nectar, and they would die in there, they would rot in there, and then the smell would turn from this beautiful smell to a stinking, rotting smell. And here Solomon is using this as an illustration of people who participate in foolish behavior. Their reputation will be damaged because they should be someone who is doing that which is good and honorable, and if you would, sweet, should be a sweet-smelling savor to our God. But yet they're participating in things that are causing their testimony to stink. It stinks in the nostrils of God. It stinks to other people. It's kind of interesting. And how many of you actually own cologne or perfume? You have bottles of it at home. All right. Well, I'm going to teach you something today that you may hate me for. Have you ever noticed that on your perfume bottle it says, Eau de Toilette? Have you ever noticed that? A few of you, all right, you're all going to go home today. You're going to be looking through your cabinets, and you're going to be looking at this little statement on there, Eau de Toilette. And when you do, you're going to look twice at that bottle and say, am I really going to put this on again? Well, let me explain. Merriam-Webster's dictionary says this about eau de toilette, which is on your perfume bottle. A perfume liquid containing lower percentage of fragrant oils that is contained in ordinary perfume or eau de perfume, called also toilet water. What? Called also toilet water. Now, again, I have an imaginative mind. This is awesome. Next year for Christmas gifts, as my wife goes out and tries to buy family members, I'm going to say, just go to a Christmas tree shop, get some bottles for me. I think we should just give them eau de toilette. We could flavor it with whatever we want. Now, in my research for this message, I actually went on and typed in the most expensive perfumes, eau de toilettes, around the world. Do you realize that these things get really expensive? I mean, not just a little bit. The most expensive I found was $1 million bottle of perfume. And it was because of the ornate bottle and the diamonds and the pearls and everything that was on this thing. But it was unbelievable. They ranged, obviously you can go down here to just a little convenience store and get something for $1 or $2. I remember we had a gift exchange a number of years ago for one of our Christmas parties, and somebody brought in this bottle of cologne. It was obviously a very, cheap one. There you go. And it was called Untamed. And you know that every guy in there wanted that? We're all trying to fight to get this untamed cologne. It was like, that's me, the epitome of a man. Oh, untamed, you can't tame me. And put a little of this on. Well, it's just toilet water, just so you know. All right. Some of you are saying, well, you just preach the Bible, stop all this. You look it up. That's what it says on the bottle. Anyways, that idea of the toilette there actually comes from the idea of being dressed, getting ready, cleaning up. And so we use it in America. Of course, we're Americans. We cheapen everything. So we call it the toilet. And I won't go any further than that. All right. So we see here, first of all, that we need to guard our reputation. And Solomon is using something from what should be a beautiful fragrance. You as a Christian should be a beautiful fragrance to someone else. The words that come out of your mouth speak of what's in your heart, according to the Bible. It's what you dwell on, what you think about. You may be having a great day, and all of a sudden someone just cuts you off, somebody does something mean to you, and all of a sudden the vitriol comes out of your mouth because that's who you are. That's who you are. In a moment, that sweet smell can turn into a sour, disgusting smell. Your reputation of who you are. I don't care if it's in your home privately, at work with just a couple people, out in public. How you live and how you act says much about what's in your heart. And God knows this. He's written much about it in the Scriptures. Solomon understood that, and he was given the warning of guarding our reputation. And so in verse number 1 there, he tells us that as a dead fly that's in the perfume that will slowly turn it and to stink and smell, so is foolishness to those who should have a good reputation, someone who had a reputation of living wisely. One incident could mess up your reputation. And he says, guard your reputation. Be careful about your reputation. So I want you to notice in verse number 2, the heart of a wise man. And I'll just kind of go through these quickly here, because they're proverbial statements, and they kind of give us an illustration of what he's talking about. A wise man's heart is at the right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left. Now you have to understand, it was unique for people back then to be left-handed. Even today, we find there are many more right-handed people than left-handed people. To do something on the right hand was considered the place of honor. So it was something that was a place of honor, nobility. Many times when a king was to greet someone, they to show him his favor, he would allow them to stand on his right side. That was a place of honor. It was a place of respect. Alternately, the left hand was a place of dishonor. It was a place of questioning, if you would. It was something that was less impressive. And so the heart of a wise man, according to this, says the right hand is a place of honor, but the left hand was viewed as weakness compared to the right. Because so many more people were right-handed, it was a position of strength. And so what he's saying here again is that a wise man's heart is at his right hand. The wise man is stronger than those who are foolish. The right hand represented the wise person. The left hand represented the foolish person. Thirdly, I want you to notice under this is that the fools walk. The fools walk. In verse number 3, yea, also when he that is the fool walketh by the way, his wisdom does what? Faileth him. And he saith to everyone that he is a what? Fool. Here we have the fool's walk as they walk down the way, meaning the idea of walking down the way, their path, their road, their journey of life. It's the path they take, where they work, where they go to school, who they interact with. This is what we're talking about, their path, their way. Said a fool, their wisdom faileth them, and as they speak and as they go through their actions of the day, a fool does what a fool does. They act senselessly. They get involved with things they shouldn't get involved with. They portray what's really in their hearts. And so we said the fool's walk is one who is walking figuratively, but doing those things which are not the right things to do, that wisdom would say, this is the right thing for you to do. Next, I want you to notice in verse number 4, the submissive servant. The submissive servant. If the spirit of a ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. Here he's just giving some wise advice. If a ruler, a boss, or someone in authority is hot-tempered and he screams at you, he yells at you, don't quit, don't run away. Try to pacify him with soft speech. And he's just given some wisdom from perspective. Remember, Solomon was a king. Solomon understood. He watched many of the people that were under him rule different situations. He's observing, that's a good leader, that's not a good leader, that's a good leader, that's not a good leader. And as he's observing kingdoms, as he's observing princes and people serving in places, he was able to take note of hot-tempered bosses, people with quick mouths and causing shame and causing abuse on people. And he says, listen, the best way to deal with a person like that, because you're in a position of subordination, he says, don't lose your control. Don't lash back. They're in a position of authority. Remember, he's in a different day than we are today. They didn't have the rights that we have today. And so he would have been given good advice, say, look, just keep your mouth shut, bide your time. But then he also teaches in Proverbs chapter number 15, that a soft answer turneth away what? Wrath, anger. A soft answer. And sometimes we have to understand, listen, folks, this works good in our homes, does it not? You know, if your wife or your husband says something cutting, I'm sure that's never happened with all you Christians. Never happened at all. But if your wife or husband says something sarcastic, something cutting, and you lash back, guess what? We're going to have a great brouhaha, aren't we? I like that word, brouhaha. You're going to have a fight. You're going to have an argument. But if somebody just quietly listens, waits for the right opportunity, says, you know what, this isn't the best time for us to talk about this. Most of you are like, that's how you're supposed to handle that? Yes. And then come back at a time where you're both cooled down and you can talk about it logically, with rationale. A lot of people love the heat of the moment and they just go after it, and before they're done, they've said things that they'll never be able to take back. Hurtful things, hateful things sometimes. We have to be careful about this. But a submissive servant, don't quit, be calm. You can sometimes pacify him with your submission and your submissive words. A soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up even more anger. And again, he's just giving good, solid advice about how to deal with life and people. Next, I want you to notice in verses 5 through 7, the foolish rule. The foolish rule. Notice this in verse number 5. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun. He uses this statement several times throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, as an error which proceedeth from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low place. I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking servants upon the earth. You say, well, okay, what does all that mean? All right, let me just explain it to you. Solomon calls it, first of all, evil or an error in leadership. He's talking about those in leadership. And he may be looking at his own children. He may be looking at other kings, other rulers that are coming up under him, and he's watching poor decisions that are being made. And he makes this statement because it's placing people in positions that have not earned it. Placing people in positions that have not earned the authority and who are not skilled to be in that position. So the idea of having a subordinate be on the horse, which the horse would have been the place for the king or for the ruler, but the king or the ruler is the one walking. In other words, someone in a position of authority put their best friend or a family member in a position of authority over someone who was wiser than them. Do we not see that in our own government sometimes? All right, I'll stop. Do we not see there's sometimes there's people that want to put their friends, their buddies, pay back for something. They'll put them in, and they may not even be equipped for that position. And they'll overlook someone who actually had the skill, had the education, had the ability to take that position. And you're saying, listen, this is something I've seen. It's an error. It's an injustice. It's an inequity. It shouldn't happen, but I've seen it happen. He said you have someone who actually should be in a position of leadership, is not put there, and you have somebody else put down to a lower leadership, to a lower place of leadership. And he said it's something that he's seen as an error. It shouldn't happen, but it does. Next main point I want you to see is guard your work. First of all was guard your reputation. All these things that I mentioned, I'm going through this quick because there's so much in this portion of Scripture. Guard your reputation. Next, guard your work, verses 8 through 10. There are two possible meanings to this, and I'm saying that because you could be strong on one or the other, but I'll give you two possible ways that you can look at this portion of Scripture. One is treating one another with respect, abiding by the established laws, not overstepping ethical boundaries. And let me read it to you, and I'll go back and explain that, and then we'll go back and explain the other possibility. Verse number 8, he that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an hedge, and a hedge there is a wall, it's not actually bushes like we call them here, a serpent shall bite him. Whoso removeth stones, talking about in a quarry, cutting out, moving heavy objects like that, shall be hurt therewith. And he that cleaveth wood, meaning takes an axe and cuts wood, cuts trees down, shall be endangered thereby. If the iron be blunt, and if he do not whet the edge, then must he put to more strength. But wisdom is profitable to direct. And taking that last statement there, wisdom is profitable to direct those who are doing some form of work. And as we look at this here, first of all, the first meaning I want to give you is treating one another with respect, abiding by the established laws, not overstepping ethical boundaries. Again, Solomon would have observed people making wise decisions, making foolish decisions. He would have observed people in leadership. He would have observed people in fellowship. And as he is giving this advice here, starting in verse number 8, he that diggeth a pit shall fall into it. Why would a pit be dug and someone might fall into it? Because someone didn't take the proper precautions, perhaps, to set up the right kind of cones in order to mark it off. So that's an occupational hazard. But also sometimes a pit is dug for someone else so they would fall into it. But in the long run, what happens is someone finds out that you dug that pit, so that person would fall in, and so you get caught anyways. You understand? He's using this as a means of saying, listen, there are some things that go on that are dangers to us. And whether they're occupational hazards or they're unethical treatment of people, there are things that should not go on as you are ruling over people or as you're dealing with people. And so treating others with respect, abiding by the established laws, not overstepping one's boundaries in their position. Talking about occupational hazards. The idea in verse number 10 again, wisdom is profitable to direct. So wisdom is what guides us here in our occupations. Whether you're digging a pit and making sure you're safe, we now know there's laws that have been passed in our own country. Even when we were building this building, we were working on some of the trenches coming in here. We had to be very careful about the walls caving back in on us when you were down inside that trench. And so they have these steel boxes they set up. So if you're down there working in a trench, they put the steel box down in there so the walls can't cave back in on you. It's a safety precaution. That's a good way of protecting from an occupational hazard. Not only that, but just logically, if you would, if someone is moving a stone wall, in one respect, if you're moving a stone wall, you could be moving an ancient landmark. When we were building this building, we had to mark the stone walls. The town already had the old historic stone walls marked on this property map. And they told us very specifically, you're not allowed to touch the stone walls. You can't touch them. You can't move them. If you do, you have to go to the state, get a permit. You have to go through all this. So they're very clear about not moving the stone walls. Why? Because they represent an historic marker of some kind. Well, that was like, perhaps it was like that in Solomon's day, but also, he was saying here, listen, you move a stone wall, sometimes there's creatures that have made nests in there. And as you move that stone wall, it could be a serpent comes out and bites you. And he's saying, there's protection, there's safety here. And he's just going through some different illustrations. And I think you can look at both meanings there. One for occupational hazards, the other for how do you treat someone with respect and dignity and obeying the laws of the land and making sure that you're careful in what you're doing. And then I want to move on to the next one, guard your tongue. Guard your tongue, verses 11 through 15. Notice what it says here in verse number 11. It says, surely the serpent will bite without enchantment, and a babbler is no better. Well, that's a great verse. You have a serpent who will bite without enchantment. And if you understand, back in the Middle East, even still today, that people go over there and they'll play a certain musical instrument to try and entertain people with a cobra coming out of a box or out of a little cage there, a basket, and they'll try to enchant the cobra. And we understand this. A snake will bite if they feel threatened. A snake will bite if they're not being enchanted. And then the idea that he's trying to get across here is that so would a person who's a babbler. What's a babbler? A babbler, again, is someone who just is a fool who speaks their mind. They have a loose tongue. The word babble actually comes from the idea of a tongue. And so it's someone who has a loose tongue. It's someone who has a tongue that speaks foolishly in context what's going on here. And so what he's saying is, just like a serpent will bite unexpectedly, so also will someone who's a fool. They have a loose tongue. Well, I can't tell you how many times people's tongues have got them in trouble. They've said something at an ill-advised time. They've said something they should not have said because it wasn't their place to say it. They've tried to help and they only hurt. We can go on and on. Hey, look, I've done that. I'm sure you've done it as well. But listen, this is something he's guarding all of us against. He says, you got to be very careful. But there are people out there that actually enjoy hurting and causing others to hurt with their tongue. They enjoy slander. They enjoy bringing up questions about people. You know what's so hard? I had to learn this early on in ministry. You can't defend yourself. People will say what they're going to say, and they'll have enough people to listen and think, well, that could be true, and your reputation is ruined. And there's nothing you can do. Even if it's a total lie, there's just nothing you can do. And you just have to just say, if you want to fight it, you can fight it, but you're going to exhaust yourself. Let your life demonstrate who you really are. That's all you can say. It's so hard. Some people I've seen, they spend so much energy and so much time, I got to get my reputation back. I say, I understand, I appreciate it. You might want to meet with them, try to clarify, but they're still going to believe what they want to believe. You can't always get your reputation back based on what someone else says, even a slander, even a lie. Sometimes you just can't get it back. And you have to be satisfied that God will meet that out in His time. And I know that's a tough thing to deal with, but again, there's right and wrongs when it comes to dealing with someone who is a babbler. So we understand that the babbler's tongue, it's a dangerous thing. It's like a snake. It'll bite unexpectedly, and sometimes we have people like that, even Christians who are like that. And that's a sad thing, that if we have Christians who might have a tongue that wants to hurt and to abuse others. Then also we notice here, verse number 12, the wise man. He says, the words of a wise man's mouth are gracious. The lips of a fool will swallow up himself. What's it say? Well, first, the lips of a fool will swallow up himself. The fool will keep speaking, and finally, people will just say, you know what, that guy's just a fool. They'll speak enough where you'll just mark them and say, okay, that person just doesn't know how to keep their mouth shut. That person just says things that nobody should say. That person just doesn't even know what they're talking about. They just ramble. They go on and on. That's just a fool. A wise man, though, speaks gracious words, and this is a great thing for us to remember. Colossians 4:6 even says this, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. Listen, don't always be in a rush to respond or to retaliate if somebody questions you or comes to you with something. Learn to just think, listen, process. It is much better that you take the time before you respond than to respond and say, oh, can I take that back? Oh, that's not really what I meant. It's too late. It's better that you just take the time, process what's going on, then think about it. Listen, I've worked in secular field for many, many years. I've worked in church ministry with dealing with people that are against each other, on and on and on and on. This works in every realm there is, from family to employment to church to strangers. If you can be a peacemaker, learn to be a peacemaker. Learn to just listen before you respond. Try to figure out where they're coming from. Sometimes you understand, people are hurting. And hurting people sometimes will hurt others. And there's many times that you just need to be the big boy or the big girl and just take it. They may come in and say, Pastor, you this, or you, whoever you are, you're a friend, and they'll just vent on you. Just learn to swallow. Just learn, okay, I love you. Are we done now? Well, let's see how we can fix this problem. But if you want to keep defending yourself, it doesn't get any better. Now you're going to separate as friends. You're going to say, she hurt me, he hurt me. Da, da. Okay. It's so much better if we can work things out. Just learn to take it sometimes. Learn to think about it. Pray about it if you have to. Then go back and say, you know what? You said some things. Let's talk through that. That's big boy and big girl stuff. That's mature Christian stuff. And so we understand that Solomon's given great advice here. He says the wise man, his speech is gracious. Doesn't mean you can't take a stand on what's right. But you can do it in a gracious, kind way. The foolish man, on the other hand, his speech is uncontrolled. His speech is madness. Notice in verse number 12, it'll swallow him up. Verse number 13, the beginning of the words of the mouth of a foolishness and the end of his talk is mischievous madness. He's got the M&M problem. Mischievous madness. He's got a complex. Not only does he have the mischievous madness complex, in verse number 14, a fool is full of words. A man cannot tell what shall be. What shall be after him? Or who can tell him? In other words, there's no making sense. The guy just talks and he thinks he's making sense. You're sitting there and you're making no sense and you don't know what's coming next. That's what he's talking about here. He's a fool. And verse number 15, the labor of the foolish wearieth every one of them, because he knoweth not how to go to the city. Here's a guy saying, follow me. Follow me. And he's going everywhere. He doesn't know what he's doing. And people are like, do we keep following this joker or what? There comes a point where somebody's got to speak up and say, okay, next. We need a new leader. We need someone else to be. Solomon viewed this. He saw it in his own life. He saw as he was guiding a kingdom and a nation. He saw other nations and kingdoms, and he was able to observe and take notes on what was going on around him. He said, listen, this is no way to lead people. And so we see that he's says to guard your tongue. And then lastly, a guide for leaders, or guide your leaders. Verses 16 through 20. And I'll just go through this very quickly for you. 16 through 20. Woe to thee, O land, when the king is a what? Child. And the princes eat in the morning. Let me just go through this very quickly. That the king is a child. In other words, he's an immature leader. And he eats in the morning, meaning that he's continued his drunkenness through the night, and now it's morning, and he's up eating and drinking again. That's what it's talking about here. Talking about someone who is so immature, they understand the position they're in as a king, as a leader, requires them to really be on guard in areas. Matter of fact, it was a rule for the kings. They weren't supposed to drink. And they weren't supposed to marry many wives. They seemed to violate those rules, and it hurt their kingdoms. Boy, we haven't got any better today in our day and age. The same wisdom that God gave to kings would be good wisdom for us today. And so we understand here, the guide your leaders. The immature leader, number one, the first thing there is they feast in the morning. In other words, they're drunk, they're hungover, they continue eating. Verse number 17 is the wise leader. Verse number 17, blessed art thou, O land, when the king is the son of nobles, and thy princes eat in due season for strength and not for drunkenness. And so here he brings up this thing. He said, listen, there's a time for feasts and banquets, but it's not like what these young immature kings are doing. So there's an appropriate place and time for certain things. Not drunkenness, but making sure that you're being wise as a noble leader. Verse number 18, we have the lazy leader. By much slothfulness buildings decay. And through idleness of hands, the house droppeth through. In other words, you got sagging floors, you got broken down pieces. A lazy person doesn't fix those things. And you're saying, listen, we can't have laziness in leadership. Leadership is required to set the tone, to set the pace. Here we go. This is what we need to do. They get the right personnel to come in and help out. The distracted leader, verse number 19. A feast is made for laughter, and wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things. What he's saying here is the immaturity of the distracted leader. He likes to go to his parties. He likes to make merry with wine. He likes to have his fun and be entertained. But he says he's forgetting the most important thing for a kingdom. He's got to make money to make things keep running. Just like your household. You could eat, drink, and be merry, but if you don't get up the next morning and go to work, you're not going to have money. You're not going to be able to pay the bills. You're not responsible. And that's what he's saying. There's a responsibility that comes with leadership. It's not play and party. And people may look at you and say, well, you're the leader. You get all these benefits. No, no, no. Most likely a good leader is doing more work than everybody else. They just don't see it that way. And so we understand that he's saying as a king, there are many distracted leaders that just party, they participate in revelry, but they're not realizing if they don't plan, if they don't get the work going, that they're not going to make the money they need by trading and everything in order to keep the kingdom running properly. And then lastly, verse number 20, curse not the king, no, not in thy thought. Curse not the rich in thy bedchamber, for a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. In other words, he was saying, listen, as a king, as someone who serves under the king, be very careful what you say about the king. It will get back to him. Well, who told you? A little bird did. Who's a little bird? He's probably about 6 foot tall. He wants your position. And he told the king what you said negatively in that little coffee meeting you had. Hey, it happens. Be very careful what goes on in this head, goes on in this heart. Keep it between you and God. Sometimes we have to ask forgiveness for those thoughts too. What you say will get back to those in leadership. So be very careful. So we look at the mess that's in our own government. We look at the mess where people leak information that's not supposed to be leaked, classified information. We look at hackers now being able to hack into our most intimate of details of our government. And we recognize that it hasn't changed. What went on in Solomon's day is still going on in our day, just on a different technological level. And he's giving good wisdom for all of us. In conclusion, Solomon warns of fools' words, their ways, and their work. We should also learn to guard our reputation, guard our work, and to guard our tongue. And then learn to be guided by good principle, good leadership principles. Don't play the fool in your search for true happiness. Practice godly principles. If you practice godly principles, you'll be so much happier than those who just live their life the way they want to live it. Godly principles will always bless you in the long run. Father, thank you for the Word of God. Thank you for the ability to be able to share